Broadcasting live from the Newsmax studio in New York City, here is Steve Malzberg.
Because if you look at the numbers in this new poll by NBC and the Wall Street Journal, that's who they are, the defendants. And while the public anger is aimed at politicians generally, it might be healthy to note that it's not President Obama out there vetoing bills a busy Congress has passed. No, it's a don't do anything Congress not doing what the president keeps.
Facts of the Nation by a man who will give it to us straight, Chris Matthews. Not. Joining us now is Noah Rothman, associate editor of HotAir.com. Hello, Noah.
How you doing?
Good, good. You know, NBC News, Wall Street Journal poll had terrible numbers for Barack Obama on approval rating. It was the lowest ever in that poll for him, down to 40%. In that case here, poll. But NBC Nightly News, Chuck Todd, they didn't even give that aspect of the poll from the reports I've seen. They didn't even give the approval rating part of the poll because it was bad for Obama.
Actually, I've seen them talk about it pretty frequently. Chuck Todd especially. He's been all over Twitter talking about it. He led on Morning Joe when he talked about this.
Well, not at first they didn't. They hid that part of the poll.
But Congress, also but Congress, as though they can run
against.
Right.
They try to make it seem like, well, if it's not so bad for Obama because look, Congress is worse. But you know, Congress is always bad.
Yeah, and it's fundamentally misleading to say that Congress isn't pursuing the president's agenda. They're not pursuing the president's agenda, but it's not a do-nothing Congress. It's a do-nothing Senate. And this is not something that people really especially want to highlight, especially those who prefer the Democratic majority's control over the upper chamber.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And as for Chris Matthews here, and the Republicans have finally started to speak up about this do-nothing Congress, the implication being the House. They've sent over 300 bills to Harry Reid in the Senate that have just laid there and never been brought up, and a lot of them are jobs related, and they've been there for years.
Yeah, and I think that there might be something to the notion that the American people are really fed up with the fact that there's just nothing happening. Because when later down in that poll, they asked a whole bunch of variety of issues about action items, things that the president has talked about how to, and the Republican majority in the House have talked about how to move forward, ways to address the economic situation, immigration, and a variety of issues. And all of them tested relatively positively, varying degrees of positively, but there was none that were a majority didn't favor. The public sees inaction as a problem. I think that's a fair way to analyze this poll. Now, what to do about that is something entirely different.
Right. All right. You wrote a piece today, just a little while ago, on HotAir.com about the chairman of the RNC, Reince Priebus, who has blasted Congressman Mo Brooks, who was on this show the other day and doubled down and defended and went further on his remarks, declaring that there is a war on whites from the administration and the Democrats.
Yeah, and as I said in that column, I opened up that column with the fact that I've been covering the Democratic and the liberal progressive wing of the Democratic Party's racial inflammatory rhetoric, desirous of creating racial animus in order to create some sort of temporary political gain. It's really destructive. It's very bad politics, and I've been on the record saying it's really horrible. But what Brooks has done is really created a mess. So much so that today, Chairman Reince Priebus came out and called those comments idiotic, and he had no other option. He wasn't allowed to do anything else because it completely contradicts what the autopsy report, the Way Forward report from 2013, was saying about tone, about tonality, and talking towards minorities and cultural issues, etc. It really was just stepping all over the message. And he left the chairman no choice but to denounce those remarks. I think that actually plays into what Brooks wants, which is to create a little distance between himself and the party establishment. That's always beneficial for somebody who wants to to create distance from the establishment, which is not very popular.
Yeah,
conservative grassroots side, but it was sloppy politics.
Yeah, no, it certainly is. He's, like I said, he's doubled down, but I think his goal is, just as you said, he wants to create that distance between the establishment and himself. You also wrote a great piece talking about this new poll that debunks what would you put it as the empirical reality that Americans don't really back Israel.
Yeah, that was a really obnoxious poll. There's no way to put it. It had asked the American public whether or not they believe that their country's foreign policy should be either want their country to be fair-minded and neutral towards Israelis and Palestinians. There's something called social desirability bias, which this question feeds directly into. Most people are going to answer that question in a way they believe society believes they should respond to it, which is positively. But it's very misleading, because of the implication that it creates a desirability bias, which respondents are going to feed inside. No such thing exists. We're talking about two distinct entities. The Palestinian Authority in the West Bank has nothing to do with Hamas and Gaza. There's no conflict on the West Bank. It's all with Hamas. It's all on Gaza. And when you ask those questions distinctly, when you ask the public about Hamas and how they feel about Hamas and the Gaza conflict, you get entirely different results. And you find that the United States and the American people are really supportive of Israel in this regard and always have been. In fact, it hasn't really changed dramatically since 2002. A Gallup poll showed the exact same thing, that the public was broadly supportive of Israel and not really supportive of the Palestinian side, when that was an appropriate way to frame that question.
Right.
So it's not really even dependent on circumstances.
Right, and now, of course, the proper way to ask it would be, calling Hamas what they are, not the Palestinians, but terrorists.
Right, and nobody's even going so far as to say that. And it's actually shocking the press now. The last 48 hours, 72 hours have seen the American press establishment shocked by the fact that Hamas spokespeople actually believe blood libel. They're not like just playing around. They really genuinely believe it. And that France 24 reporters were almost blown up when rockets in civilian areas were going off right next to them. They're shocked by the fact that these things that have been alleged by Israel for months now, in fact years actually, are actually proven to be true, and they're on camera, and they just can't ignore it because it's in their face.
And you've had these spokespeople for the Hamas side, or the representing the Palestinian groups, that come on and call it lies that are unproven, that Hamas uses human shields. This is during the conflict. And now, like you said, we documented yesterday, you got the videos from the Indian station, you got France, you got the New York Times photographer saying that you never see a Hamas soldier, or whatever, as he put it. They hide in houses in the middle of the night and everything. And you saw the rocket launchers, the rockets being launched from right outside the hotel. And has it changed? So do they call them terrorists now? No. Now they've been elevated, even more so in the media, Noah, in the last couple of days, because they're in Egypt for these peace talks. And one side, the two sides can't agree. Who's going to give? Who's going to give on which side? I mean, it's like they're not sides. They're terrorists, and there's a country. It's insane.
Really is shocking. And now we're seeing reports that hostilities are going to resume on Friday because they haven't been able to reach any sort of agreement. Israel is blaming Hamas for all of the casualties that have occurred after the
Right, 90% of the deaths occurred after Hamas rejected the first ceasefire.
Right. None of that is going to be reported as just, it's he said, she said, because there is this commitment to maintaining some form of neutrality in reporting, whereas really not deserved.
Yeah, it's just so insane. We live in some world. Finally, quickly, Democrats, you write, far more obsessed with impeaching Obama than Republicans, and that's obvious, right?
Yeah, well, there was a Hill study that actually showed that on the floor of the House, just based on congressional transcripts, that Democrats had discussed impeachment on the floor 20 times more than their Republican counterparts. And yes, this is just, again, empirically observable. Everywhere you look, that's what Democrats are talking about and hoping to send impeachment threat. It really is all completely manufactured, and it's just shocking at the state of the media's reporting ability, that they would report that as fact and not a claim, a Democratic claim.
Nothing shocks me anymore. Nothing at all that this media does or reports as news. Noah Rothman, thank you, sir. Read him at hotair.com. Always appreciate your time.
Thank you.
All right, folks. Yeah, what is this? Do you see how they're talking about Hamas? You put a suit on a terrorist? If Osama bin Laden showed up in Egypt or something, look, hey, folks, these Boko Haram, you really want to get the goat of the left? Here we go. Boko Haram, they kidnapped those girls, right? They must have had a good reason. They must have grievances. Why don't we sit down and talk? This is insanity. All right, folks. Would you like to impeach the president? Should the president be impeached? You can't do it. If you think so or you don't, Go take the poll and vote now. Newsmax.com/Obama poll. Newsmax.com/Obama poll. Give me 5 is next.